Hello everybody, and very happy to be here. I'm going to play the violin later, so at the end. So that is my prop for later. I want to make a lot of points within this short time, so I'm going to move quite fast, so I will ask for your attention. In a way, I suppose I have a question about a lot of what is called rural development, because of the question I mentioned yesterday when we were talking about millets, and Professor Bhatt gave that amazing talk about educating us about millets, and how millets, like an indigenous food of India, has been de-developed very, very badly since British times. And in a way, like one of the first speakers yesterday, Professor Karmaka said, I also think that the British, for all the British gave India, they de-developed India in quite radical ways. And for example, in the quality of manufacture, bringing factory systems instead of the indigenous amazing quality of crafts. And also in the multiculturalism that, I mean, obviously after 1857, it was a conscious policy to divide people of different religion against each other. So those are two examples, but what is happening to the tribal people now, in the name of development, is a massive process of de-developing what have been very highly developed cultures. And this comes very much in the education process, because what are we calling development? What are we calling education? What are we calling knowledge? We really need to think. India, in this book, the aluminium book, like an anthropology of aluminium, from the experience of Adivasis in Orissa, which kind of made me quite well known in this country. One of the main themes in that book is India is not, it really questions whether India is a developing country. India became a developed country long before Britain did. This is a very, very highly developed country, but who wants to see it as a developing country? The World Bank does, the corporations do, because they want the resources of the country. And that idea of India as a developing country is an idea based on exploitation. So really we are looking at tribal culture. The tendency is to see tribal culture through cultural racism, which means we assume still, most of us who think we are educated, think that tribal cultures are backward or primitive or underdeveloped. And in many ways they've been made underdeveloped by destroying their own indigenous process of development, or destroying their knowledge and value systems. And how you see this in education is that there is a kind of mainstreamizing happening in most of what is called tribal education, that in a way, most talks about tribal development say these areas are very backward, the people, very low literacy rate, very few absent teachers, few children. If I was a child at Adivasi school, I would not go to that school. Why? Because so much of what is being taught in those schools is a kind of propaganda that is undermining the traditional knowledge and value systems. So just to say a word about these traditional knowledge and value systems, it's like what we call sexy for anthropologists now to talk about tribal knowledge systems, of how the wealth of knowledge about the plants, and that is really huge, huge bodies of knowledge they have about the plants. But it's not just about the plants, it's about a holistic way of understanding nature. So, for example, one example I often speak of, because this was about the mountains where the bauxite is. In Orissa, very often the children see in a textbook, the Oriya children, Orissa is one of the poorest states in India, but it is very rich in minerals. Those minerals are lying unutilized on the mountains. All we have to do is utilize the minerals and Orissa will get rich. Now this idea does not understand how the mining industry works. It works by incredible level of exploitation, engineered from London, my own hometown, and other cities. And there is no way to compromise with that exploitation. There is no sustainable mining going on in the country, because mining devastates landscapes, it devastates ecosystems, and it devastates the cultures that are there. So some of the other ways that the tribal cultures are much more developed, I mean, we know the ways that we're more developed than them, but what are the ways that they're more developed than us? In living sustainably. My co-author for this book, Samarendra, in his district of Kondamahal in Orissa, one of the old men one day said, "Where are the saints in your society? Is gaon mein hab sab sant hai. We are all saints in this village. We use very little, we share everything we have, and we waste nothing. We are civilized. You people, what kind of educated do you think you are?" I mean, that is the message when Adivasis speak frankly, not from a kind of poverty mentality, but really comparing the systems. That is what they say. So one of the values that we are taught in education, in mainstream education, is competition. Every term a child is tested. Who is rising, who is falling? Children are graded. And I remember when my child is going to school in Gujarat, and one day his friend had scored very badly, my son had done very well, and his friend's father, he hits the child on the head, saying, "You have to learn how to do well in exams." And how many parents in this country are doing that? That's in Gujarat, the most developed state. But what kind of education? The first thing the child is learning is, you please the teacher, you write what the teacher wants, you get good marks. That's education. In politics, yes, India is the largest democracy in the world, but what is the system of democracy? Do our politicians of different parties really sit down and try to make a consensus? One of the things about tribal politics and the meetings is that the aim is always to make a consensus. Of course, that's undermined now a lot, but one example of this is when Nehru was talking with Jaipal Singh Munda in 1946, and Nehru was saying, "We must bring democracy to the tribal areas." And Jaipal said, "You cannot bring democracy to the tribal areas. You have to learn democracy from the people. Tribal people are the most democratic people on earth." And these are very, very highly developed political systems aimed at consensus. If you look at sport, so many projects are trying to develop sport. Sport is based on competition. The traditional art form in tribal areas is dancing. And in dancing, when it's under their control, villages who may be rivals, they will meet. They will spend the whole night dancing. And so many dances they know, such skill is there, but there is no winner, there is no loser. Law, come to law and the system of law. We have to obey the law. And tribal people are very strong believers in the law. But what is the legal process? Our legal process is you pay a lot of money to lawyers. Usually the person who pays the more to the lawyers are winning a case, and how much money gets spent, how many legal cases are delayed for years, and prisons under trial and all that, we know. But what is the tribal system? The whole aim of the system is to reconcile the contestants. Two people bring a case about land, about whatever, some injury. Everybody is heard. People can shout out their anger there. And then they are fined. The fines pay for a feast of reconciliation. And what I'm saying is there is so much we have to learn. And I have not seen that learning process has started yet. And, there are many cultural sensitive schools. One of the things is the Education Ministry in 2005 gave a directive that the teaching should be done as much as possible in the child's mother tongue. But in practice, when children go to school, they're laughed at, they're humiliated often if they speak their own language, because the teacher usually doesn't know the language. One counteracting of that, and we have the next speaker is from Northeast India, and the Nagaland, what is called the communitization model of education, it allows the village school, the community in the village, to have control over the teacher's salary and leave. And hopefully also to some extent the syllabus, what the children are being taught. That it should be in the community's hand. And when you have residential schools, which is the main model, the ashram school and many more, models are there. But the problem with residential schools, it's this assimilationist model of trying to detribalize the kids. And I don't know whether you know, but in many ways this comes from what happened to the tribal peoples in Australia, in Canada, in United States. And a few weeks ago, the Prime Minister of Australia apologized to the Aborigines in general for the stolen generations, because the children were forced into schools, not allowed to speak their languages, not allowed to wear their hair long. And even now in India, how many boys going to a school who have the tribal custom is for a male to have long hair, and they will have a lot of skill of how they tie their hair up. Do you ever see that? Is it allowed in ashram schools? There is such a kind of negation. One of the phrases that captures this is, I saw it recently on a website of the Kalinga Institute of Social Science in Bhubaneswar, which is trying to do this model in a very big way. It talked about, we are teaching first-generation learners. Kya baat hai? What do you mean, first-generation learners? Do you really think that the parents of these kids may be illiterate? They may not. I mean, writing was not part of their culture, but such deep oral traditions they have passed on to the children. And now you're educating the kids to value competition, to value profit. And then are you surprised when tribal elites, whether it's in Northeast India or in Jharkhand or other places, they become very, very corrupt. They're completely alienated from their societies, both by socially and financially, but also culturally. As soon as boys starting to go to school, very often they don't want to dirty their hands with working in the fields anymore. They start to think that this abstract knowledge is of more value. So much more I would say, but I want to keep it very short. I just want to say also, this applies to medicine as well as education. So if you look at the Human Development Index, literacy is a key indicator. I would totally disagree with that in a tribal context. Literacy is no indicator of the quality of life, actually. And same with medicine, that, I mean, it's true that there are many good hospitals set up by Christian institutions in India, which really do very, very good work. But if you read the Bible, Jesus didn't go around giving people pills and injections and telling them to go to their nearest health center to give birth. He did laying on of hands, which is much more similar to tribal systems of healing. And I mean, I've heard somebody say in Jharkhand, when Adivasis become Christian, then they're told to avoid Jarabuti. This would be very, very, very sad if that is the case, that, you know, Christianity has so much to offer, but it should work with the systems. And one example of this was a student of mine was doing fieldwork in Jharkhand and said how a woman was coming to give birth into the health center. And the nurse told her, lie down. But in tribal culture, they squat to give birth. They're using gravity. It's a much, much better, more highly developed system of giving birth than lying down, which we developed in the West out of a misunderstanding of lots of how the body works. So here is this nurse shouting to this Adivasi woman, forcing her to lie down. I mean, why Adivasis don't go into hospitals is the same reason why kids don't come to school. There is no cultural sensitivity there. So what I'm saying is basically, can we begin to learn from them? And that is, I mean, to me, as important as trying to make sure there are cultural sensitive schools in the tribal areas. And, you know, there are many, many good, I've seen good models in Jharkhand, Andhra Pradesh, Orissa, West Bengal. There are many people doing that, but they need much more support, I would say, and sensitivity. But what we need to learn from them, one is thinking with the heart. One of the first things a child is taught, and as you rise up the education system, is don't bring your feelings into the analysis. Be objective. But in a way, one of the ways India developed so radically, so early, is in meditation, in self-knowledge. That we have to bring, but our children taught to understand themselves. Unless you understand yourself, that is subjectivity. There is no hope of understanding another person, another culture, and being objective about what's happening in rural development. So a lot of your presentations, I would say, they emphasize the objective features. But where is your understanding of your relationship with the people, with nature, with yourself? These are the areas we have to learn from them. And maybe above all, one thing is the sustainability, that man saying, where are the saints in your society? He's saying, we waste nothing. how do we learn that? For example, the Maori, the people of New Zealand, they gave English one word, taboo. Tapu means sacred in the Maori language. And every New Zealander knows you cannot go to a mountain that is taboo. It's not allowed. It's a sacred place for the Maori. And in the New Zealand schools, every white person is learning a lot of Maori language. You know, we need to learn from them also because the culture is in the language. And Santali, Munda, Gondi, they are very, very ancient and profound languages, actually. Another thing we need to learn is the whole thing of sharing. We need to learn how to share the resources on the earth, not to allow big corporations to come along and take all the resources, the water, the land, the minerals, the forest. I mean, they should belong to the people. And, you know, the people, when they have control over that, these movements against new projects are not anti-development. They're not anti-national. They're actually safeguarding the resources for future generations. And we need to learn from them, you know, a better power structure. How can we develop a system where power does not corrupt? I mean, at the moment we're all following America, which inherited the mantle of the world's big empire after Britain, and it behaves towards other countries like a spoilt bully at school. It's so many wars it has caused in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. The arms industry is at the heart of the economy. And if you see the armed forces, the security forces in the tribal areas, in the name of fighting Maoists, Bastar, South Chhattisgarh, that used to be one of the most beautiful places in India, has become a kind of hell on earth for many people. We really need to question, how do we bring peace there? How do we learn the best from, yeah, the Maoists have brought a few good things, getting good prices for the Adivasis, but of course their ideology is also geared towards violence. How do we bring back the sense of peace and the sense of community and consensus? And, you know, there is so much the world needs to learn from these people, as Jaipal Singh and many people have said. So that's just in a summary what I would like to say here. Thank you for your attention. I was going to play the violin. May I have 1 more minute to, please? This is a song that to me encapsulates this, and it's sung by Bob Dylan, and many of you will know the song. And it's called Where Have All the Flowers Gone? When will we ever learn? Where have all the flowers gone? Long time fair seen. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the flowers gone? Young girls have picked them, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the young girls gone? Long time fair seen. Where have all the young girls gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young girls gone? They've gone for husbands, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the husbands gone? Long time fair seen. Where have all the husbands gone? Long time ago. Where have all the husbands gone? They've gone for soldiers, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time fair seen. Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the soldiers gone? They've gone to graveyards, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time I see. Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time ago. Where have all the graveyards gone? They've gone to flowers, everyone. When will we ever learn? Thank you. Ends on a note of hope anyway, and I do believe there is hope.
Thank you, Professor.